It's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
And the phone number, as always, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Always appreciate the opportunity to fill in for Gary and Eric. They are taking a well-deserved break over the Christmas holidays. I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. I got to tell you, usually this time period here, right around the holidays, really slow for news, but not tonight. There is a lot going on. You can find me on the socials at Dan Mandis Show. Throw me a bone. If you would, follow me on X and Facebook, both at Dan Mandis Show. So there is a lot of stories that I have for you tonight. So we do have, of course, a little bit more perspective and information on the GDP numbers that came out this morning. Hunter Biden is doing interviews now. I don't know if he's trying to somehow better his reputation, but I don't think that it's working. I've got some audio bites for you from this big, long 5.5 hour interview that Hunter Biden did with Sean Ryan. I've got that for you as well. I've got some news stories on illegal immigration. It goes on and on. So let's get right to it. The fraud in Minnesota, the Somali fraud in Minnesota, the more we find out about what is going on in Minnesota, the worse it gets. And so this headline from earlier today, 98 Minnesota mayors are now warning the state fiscal policies are hurting cities, residents, and local budgets. Now, when you go into it, they're talking about the Somali fraud. So what they've now done, they've sent a letter to state leaders, including Tim Walz, Governor Tim Walz, saying that billions of dollars have simply disappeared, roughly $18 billion. They are talking about, and if you've been following the story, and Gary and Eric have been following the story of the Somali fraud in Minnesota, and they're talking about even more massive fraud. I was listening to somebody the other day, one of the local investigators, and they're saying that, basically every time you lift up a rock, there's another $50 million in fraud thanks to the Somalis. Now, you know what happened in Minnesota? We have the very powerful, the very corrupt Somalian community in the state. They've been fraudulently ripping off the state's taxpayers for years, both on immigration and in the social services program. And again, right now, I've seen estimates of anywhere from $9 to $18 billion in these 14 programs since 2018. And so now you do have the mayors, and I've got a whole thing on this. You have the mayors in Minnesota that are saying that they're going to have really a financial shortfall in the next several years. This was one of those Minnesota mayors going nuclear on Governor Walz. This was earlier today on Fox News, and he's not happy. Listen to this.
Minnesotans have been fleeced to the tune of $9 billion. This is done from fraud right out of the Minnesota Capitol in St. Paul, as well as the policies that are being championed and brought across the finish line by the legislature.
Yeah, this is a guy named Jackson Purefest. He is the mayor of Cross Lake, Minnesota. And he, of course, signed on to that letter along with 98 other mayors who said, thanks to the fraud of the Somali community, the Somalian community, they are in for a world of hurt. And they could actually see a $3 billion deficit for the 2028 budget.
Both the legislature and the governor are at fault for the fraud and the constant policies that are taxing Minnesotans.
Let's put up Minnesota's rank among key growth indicators. Very anemic and devastating growth numbers actually across the state that have happened under this governor. But Mayor Zupancic, let me ask you about something that Mike Emanuel reported at the end there, this question about whether or not the governor looked the other way on potentially $9 billion of fraud because he didn't want to point out that the majority of those who were accused and then convicted in these cases were from the Somali community. What do you say to that?
Yeah. By the way, just to add a little bit more perspective there. So you know that Tim Walz, governor for the fine state of Minnesota, used to be a fine state. Now it's unfortunately clearly not. But everybody was afraid of being called racist. There's a number of things that happened. Number one, they were afraid of being called racist. Number two, there are accusations, and I'm going to get into this in a second, but there's also accusations that they were receiving, Keith Ellison, the Attorney General for the state of Minnesota, they were receiving campaign donations from the very people that were ripping off the taxpayers in Minnesota.
Well, I don't understand what difference that makes to anyone else. How would anyone else be approached or confronted if they stole money from someone?
So, yeah, that was a very big deal. When they started talking about how they would be called racist, everybody scattered. And, you know, I've been saying for years, I've been in talk radio and I've been a talk show host for many, many years. And one of the things that I have always said was that political correctness will destroy America. And here we are. I mean, this is yet another example. We don't call it political correctness anymore. Now we call it being woke, whatever. But clearly, this is yet another example. Now, you could say that what the lawmakers and Governor Tim Walz and Keith Ellison and some of these other people, Ilhan Omar, they knew that this was going on, and perhaps they utilized the fear of being called racist really as a cover for just not wanting to tick off the Somalian community there in Minneapolis, because if you don't get their vote, you don't win the state. You don't win the district. That's also a very big possibility. By the way, you heard them talking about in that audio bite, you heard them talking about how Minnesota has been having a lot of problems economically, talking about these key growth indicators. They're down in GDP growth, job growth, labor force growth, per capita income growth, and growth in median household income. They are down, and they are down a lot. And of course, you know, the reason for this is bad management under Tim Walz. I mean, this is not a surprise to anyone. And when you look at all of this, you think Kamala Harris actually thought that this guy would be a good running mate. It's crazy. So I don't know if that says more about Tim Walz or Kamala Harris. Now, we know that both are complete disasters. But you talk about housing. You talk about these programs for autistic children. You talk about child nutrition programs, among others. Those are the kind of programs that were fraudulent, and these are the kind of programs that this community were ripping off. Now, over the weekend, there was a speech given by Tim Walz, and this was a speech that he gave in 2022. Now, the reason why this is resurfaced is because in 2022, when he was giving this speech, he was also knowingly covering for the Somali fraud. That's right. And that's why people are saying this speech by Governor Tim Walz certainly did not age well.
We know there is no separating Minnesota of who we are from our Somali brothers and sisters. It is such a part of it is part of who we are.
So when he's giving that speech, he knows that there is rampant fraud, and he also knows that he's not doing a damn thing about it. He's out there courting their incredibly powerful vote. So he was all about, you know, giving them obviously everything that he could to get those votes and keep his power.
It's such a good part of who we are in every aspect of our life. And the opportunity that we have in Minnesota, as we said, to make sure there is no reason that every single person in Minnesota has to go to bed hungry at night. We have the ability to feed everyone, to make sure every child goes to school. There's no reason to have lunch tickets and lunch counters and lunch money and that. We have the ability to provide universal meals for breakfast and lunch to every single Minnesotan.
So that is Governor Tim Walz. And basically, it sounds like he is advocating for socialism, talking about ensuring that these Somalis are well fed and well taken care of, which clearly at the time, many of them were, because they were ripping off the good people of Minnesota. So these comments obviously didn't age well. 81% of Somalian immigrants are on some sort of welfare benefit. I know you've perhaps heard these numbers. We're talking about food stamps. We're talking about Medicaid. We're talking about cash welfare. So in addition to ripping off the taxpayers, they're also getting some sort of government benefit. And all the while, the cities in Minnesota are having problems, and yes, the mayors are panicking. I was telling you about that letter that the mayors have sent to Governor Tim Walz. This is from Fox News. In a letter to state lawmakers and Tim Walz, the 98 mayors expressed concern and frustration, saying that the state was slipping in national economic rankings. That's just what I told you a few minutes ago. They say fraud, unchecked spending, and inconsistent fiscal management in St. Paul have trickled down to our cities, reducing our capacity to plan responsibly, maintain infrastructure, hire and retain employees, and sustain core services without overburdening local taxpayers, says the letter. Cities across the state now face workforce shortages, slowed business investment, rising operational and construction costs, and families choosing to leave Minnesota altogether. In addition, the mayors noted potential property tax increases as a result of unfunded state mandates and costs that force cities to shift the burden to residents and businesses. In other words, people who are in Minnesota, they are getting hammered with these property tax increases and all of these other taxes, and that money is going to support the Somalis. Whether we're talking about the abject fraud that is happening in the state or all of these welfare benefits. Yet that doesn't stop Tim Walz from saying, oh, yeah, we've got to stand by the Somalis.
There's no reason we shouldn't be able to house every Minnesotan with investments to make sure that they're culturally appropriate ways that we can.
Oh, my God. I want to make sure you heard that, because this particular soundbite absolutely triggered me when he says that we have to be able to, in Minnesota, they have to be able to culturally house the fine people of Somalia as they are in Minnesota. Did you hear that? We need to culturally appropriately house these folks. I don't even know what that means, but it just irritates the living heck out of me.
It's such a good part of who we are in every aspect of our life. And the opportunity that we have in Minnesota, as we said, to make sure there is no reason that every single person in Minnesota has to go to bed hungry at night. We have the ability to feed everyone, to make sure every child goes to school. There's no reason to have lunch tickets and lunch counters and lunch money and that. We have the ability to provide universal meals for breakfast and lunch to every single Minnesotan.
Right. And again,
there's no reason we shouldn't be able to house every Minnesotan with investments to make sure that they're culturally appropriate ways that we can make sure we lend and have the ability to build housing to transfer wealth down through generationally. And there's absolutely no reason that anyone in Minnesota, especially our children, shouldn't have the option for affordable quality health care. We have the best providers in the world, and we have the capacity to do that. I want to thank our friends in the legislature. I know Steve Elkins is here and others.
I love how Tim Walz is just sitting there saying, okay, so we need to be able to, pass that wealth down generationally. And it's like, well, actually, Governor Walz, what you're doing is you are taking other people's wealth and literally just giving it to these Somalians or these Somalis. Now, remember, of course, the Somalis are also sending that money back to Somalia, remittances, and it ends up in the coffers of Al-Shabaab, the terrorist organization. And so what's crazy about this video is that he is praising these fraudsters from Somalia. He knows the fraud is going on because you had, remember this part of the story? You had 480 DHS staffers accusing Tim Walz of retaliation if they spoke up. And by the way, these Somalis, they are living the high life, right? Private lakefront villas and lakefront property and first-class plane tickets and fancy cars and homes and the rest of it. So the more you hear of the fraud in Minnesota, the hands of these Somalis, and it was something that Tim Walz and the Attorney General Keith Ellison and Ilhan Omar, they all knew that it was going on. They all heard the protests of the 480 or so employees there within Minnesota that this was going on, and yet they shamed and they would retaliate against anybody that would blow the whistle. And so now the whistleblowers are blowing the whistle on Tim Walz, who's out there saying, oh, I had no idea this is going on. Got a little bit more on this straight ahead. 866-90 Red Eye. My name is Dan Mandis. We'll return next on Red Eye Radio.
Brought to you by Hot Shot Secret.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at J.J. Keller. At a roadside inspection, inspectors may ask to see supporting documents. The document generated or received by a motor carrier in the normal course of business that can be used by law enforcement to verify a driver's logs. These documents can include bills of lading, itineraries, schedules, or equivalent documents that indicate the origin and destination of each trip. They can also include dispatch or trip records, expense receipts related to on-duty/not driving periods, electronic mobile communication transmitted through a fleet management system, and payroll records, settlement sheets, or equivalent documents that indicate payment to a driver. Drivers using paper logs must also keep toll receipts. Supporting documents must contain the driver's name, carrier-assigned identification number, or vehicle unit number that can be linked to the driver, the date, the name of the nearest city, town, or village, and the time. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller & Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90 Red Eye on Red Eye Radio.
$866-90 Red Eye is the phone number. 866-907-3339. And by the way, I have activated our text line that I use for my local show in Nashville, Tennessee. So if you don't want to call in, you can text in. That phone number is 615-737-9986, 615-737-WWTN. If you want to communicate with me, you can via the text line. Jonathan Turley is a guy who I always like to listen to. He was on Fox News. In the previous segment, I was talking about the rampant Somali fraud in Minnesota. And every day, it seems like we get more and more horrifying news as to the scope of this fraud. And Jonathan Turley, he was shocked as well.
This is breathtaking. I mean, we're talking about $9 billion. I mean, that doesn't just evaporate into the ether. It really takes a concerted effort by the criminals, but also almost a willful blindness by regulators. The evidence suggests that groups were coming into Minnesota in order to engage in this fraud because it was known as a soft target. And I think that Congress needs to not only look at what happened here, these are federal dollars, but there may be a need to consider whether we need some type of clawback provision, that when states like Minnesota show no real, responsibility over federal funds to the tune potentially of billions of dollars, then maybe the state needs to pay us back that money. Because it's not theirs. We gave it to them for a purpose, and it seemed like very few people were minding the store.
There you go. And boy, that is certainly true. Although I think, as Jonathan Turley says, willfully ignorant, head in the sand, looking the other way, that's Tim Walz.
You're listening to Red Eye Radio. Season's greetings from the Uniden America Studios.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number. By the way, Merry Christmas and appreciate you listening. My name is Dan Mandis in for Gary and Eric, and George is calling from Los Angeles. George, how are you?
I'm all right. How's it going?
It's going well. I've had a lot of coffee, so far so good. What's up?
Okay, so you were saying there was a problem with the Somalis stealing money or causing fraud. Is that the subject?
Yeah, it's one of the subjects
right?
tonight. Yeah.
Yeah, I found it interesting though, because look, so if you get a lot of immigrants here, ask yourself why the immigrants are here. It's because the U.S. has destabilized and monopolized the resources with the oil companies. And one of the things you got to be real with yourself. I'm a truck driver. I drove in all over the United States. Every major city, Detroit, all of them, they literally look like a war zone. It's disgusting. And what it is, it's the local government. The local government's corruption. It starts from the city councils to the mayor to police departments, all of them funneling money to each other from construction firms. What happened in New York from the 1920s all the way to the 1990s, the Italian mafia was let in by the government. So let's not, the Kennedys were in on it. So what happened in the U.S. the last 30 years was the downfall of every city was major corruption, not even federal corruption, local corruption. It's what happened in Los Angeles. And it's kind of interesting is that the rich have a monopoly in certain areas. You got Pasadena, you got Beverly Hills, where they put the money in certain areas to keep everybody else down. The Somalis are here because the country of Africa has been destabilized by the monopoly of oil. So they're trying to do that in Venezuela. Trump said. So what I'm trying to get at is you need to wake up. There's never been a major arrest or an indictment for treason on any political figure because they're all corrupt. So blaming these Somalis for what they're doing or any immigrant.
Hey George, I appreciate the call. There's a lot to unpack. Number one, I appreciate the call, and I will blame the Somalis because they knew exactly what they were doing. So I'm not going to allow you to be perfectly candid. I'm not going to allow you to say, oh, you can't blame the Somalis. Of course I can blame the Somalis. That's number one. Number two, they know exactly what they're doing and taking advantage of the taxpayers. And number three, you also have the local politicians, as you so astutely mentioned, whether we're talking about Tim Walz, whether we're talking about Keith Ellison, whether we're talking about, specifically Minnesota, Ilhan Omar, they also knew what was going on. And so for them, they were selling out the people of Minnesota. Now, when you talk about how the cities across America look like war zones, you mentioned Detroit. I mean, I'll throw out a whole bunch. I mean, you can talk about Washington, D.C. before the National Guard went in. You can talk about here in my state of Tennessee, we have Memphis. Of course, the National Guard and other forces are in there as well. But when you talk about Chicago, we can talk about Chicago. There's news about Chicago today. There's been a Supreme Court ruling against Donald Trump using National Guard troops in Illinois. We'll talk about that in a second. But when you look at all of these governments, these local governments, they're all Democrats. George, let's talk about Los Angeles. You're blaming big oil, and we can go down that road, I suppose, if you want, but I don't really want to because I think it distracts from what is going on with the Democrats and their corruption in big cities and in blue states across the country. Gavin Newsom, look at all of the failure points of California under the reign of Gavin Newsom. Look at the failures of these blue states when it comes to being sanctuary cities. You want to talk about sanctuary cities and sanctuary states? That is also a very, very big problem that always ends up with some corruption, a lot of corruption. Look at what has happened in Minnesota. Look at all of the corruption and all of the crime that is going on in places like Los Angeles. The failure of leadership, the failure to lead, the failure to just be able to manage cities. I mean, this is a Democrat problem. In Tennessee, the state of Tennessee, in the city of Minnesota, you know how long it's been since they've had Republican leadership at the local level? the last time they had a Republican mayor? It has been years. And before the Republicans finally came in and swooped in and started helping Memphis, and I could just talk about this with some authority because I'm in Nashville, the Republicans have finally come in with some forces, National Guard and so forth, to help abate the crime in Memphis. All of a sudden, the crime has gone down, the murder rate's gone down, violent crime is down, and they found a bunch of missing kids. Why? It sure as hell wasn't because of the damn Democrats. It was because the Republicans came in. Donald Trump sending in the National Guard. Governor Bill Lee finally doing something and sending in the National Guard as well. So if you want to talk about policies, because that's what we should be focused on, is the policies of Republicans, law and order policies. That's what makes cities livable. We could talk about the corruption. We could talk about governors like Tim Walz and attorneys general like Keith Ellison in Minnesota looking the other way, allowing all of this to happen. This is a Democrat problem. And I'm not saying that the Republicans aren't, there's not corrupt Republicans out there. Clearly there are. Wherever you find a politician, you're going to find corruption. But it is far more of a problem on the Democrat side, as what we've been discovering with the administration of Joe Biden. Look at everything that Doge found. Look at the wide open border. Again, look at the sanctuary city policies. Look at what all of that becomes. All of that leads to crime and corruption in blue cities across America. There is a reason why California has turned into a crap hole. There is a reason why Minnesota has turned into a crap hole. And there is a reason why Tennessee and Florida and conservative states are thriving. It is because of conservative policies. And I think there's failures in leadership. There's failures in recognizing that criminals are criminals and they don't need coddling. Their asses need to be thrown in jail. The soft on crime policies of the Democrats, that is also part of what is turning places like California and Seattle, Washington, and Portland, Oregon, and all of the Chicago, Illinois. There's a reason why these states and these cities are suffering. It's because of the policies of the Democrats. And yeah, I'm right there with you on corruption. And again, I'm not saying that there's not Republicans that are corrupt as well. But look at everything that we've been discovering. I mean, look at all of the, and I don't want to go through all of the different cities, but Chicago is one of the most corrupt cities in America, led by Democrats. So there's a litany of reasons why these blue cities and these blue states are suffering. There's a reason why all of these various cities are finding people moving out, fleeing from Democrat rule. You know, it gets so frustrating as a guy who reads the news every single day. And I see the same stories over and over and over. Did you see the story in Seattle, Washington? A 75-year-old woman, 75 years old, is just standing on a street corner. And some guy walks up to her, some dude that has a rap sheet a mile long and should have been in jail. Some guy walks up to her and hits her in the head with some sort of a stick, with some sort of a nail coming out of it, blinds her in one eye. That's what soft on crime policies bring to these blue cities. And the innocent victims of this crime is as horrifying as it is sad. And it's because of the Democrats. I mean, how many stories have we seen of innocent people in North Carolina, in New York, wherever it may be, where they are pushed in front of trains, stabbed to death on trains or buses or subways? We see these stories all the time. And what is so sad about it is that it is so obviously avoidable. Because you look at the rap sheets of the guys that do this, and it is clearly and painfully obvious they should be in jail. And I think that it is so absolutely and utterly ridiculous that you've got all these jackholes in cities all across America as Donald Trump is sending in the National Guard, places like Washington, D.C., early on, where you had all of these morons out there chanting Black Lives Matter. Do you know how many black lives Donald Trump has saved in places like Washington, D.C., in places like Memphis, Tennessee, by sending in the authorities, by sending in the National Guard? Because when you look at the murder rates and you look at the people that are being murdered in those cities, many of them are black. Donald Trump wants to save black lives. He wants to save lives, period. And these idiots are out there screaming Black Lives Matter when, as a matter of fact, it is the president who is saving black lives. These people can't think beyond their nose. So when we start talking about blue cities, and we start talking about, and I can say this with some authority, because I grew up in Los Angeles. I'm one of many people who fled Los Angeles. And George, I don't know if you've ever heard me before, but I've told this story before. When I was living in Los Angeles, I had 2 small kids. And I saw my neighborhood that I was living in basically going to hell in a handbasket. The school that my kids were going to go to, nobody spoke English. This was years ago. Crime rate was going up, graffiti all over the place, illegal aliens all over the place. And the city and the state that I loved was being decimated. And it certainly has not gotten any better. So if we're talking about corruption, if we're talking about failure to lead, if we're talking about bad policies, soft on crime policies, sanctuary city and sanctuary state policies, all of those are clearly tenets of Democrat rule, certainly not Republican rule. This is what the Democrats bring to the table. And that's why you have all of these people that are fleeing Democrat-run cities and Democrat-run states. And yet, for some reason, people in these states, people in these cities continue to vote for Democrats time and time again. It is so incredibly infuriating. 866-90-RED-EYE. We'll return next.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
It's Red Eye Radio. All that yelling I did in the last segment, and now we come back with this nice music. I kind of feel bad. I broke the Christmas spirit. But that guy, George, he really triggered the host. And that's fine. I mean, it's all fine, well, and good. But the reality is that there are a lot of great points to be made. And I believe that I made them on the perils of Democrat rule. By the way, the Supreme Court has given Donald Trump a big old heaping stack of coal for Christmas. The headline is, Trump-friendly Supreme Court turns on the president in savage blow to his National Guard operation. That's right. This comes out of a lawsuit from Chicago. The Supreme Court refusing to allow the Trump administration to deploy National Guard troops in the Chicago area in a significant defeat for its massive immigration crackdown. So I'll get into more of this coming up, but this is also in the news this Christmas Eve morning. Follow me on X, if you would, at Dan Mandis Show. You can also find me on Facebook and Instagram as well. Appreciate you listening to Red Eye Radio.
Top of the Hour News is brought to you by House Products. Visit houseproducts.com.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis. This is Red Eye Radio.
866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Hope you are doing well, and I hope you have a very Merry Christmas. We are utilizing my text line. I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. If you'd like to tune in, please do. I'm on 6 to 10 Eastern Time, 5 to 9 Central. We do have a text line that we use. If you don't want to call in, you can text in 615-737-9986, 615-737-WWTN. We wrapped up the last hour talking about how the Supreme Court has basically told Donald Trump, for now, that he does not have the authority to utilize the National Guard in Chicago. And we did see even the conservative judges telling the Trump administration going in too fast and basically you don't have the authority, which I got to be honest with you is really sad, because what we are seeing, as I did mention in the last hour, what we are seeing is huge progress in cities like Washington, D.C. and cities like Memphis. And so, you know, I think that the president will continue, and the president's team has come out and said that they will continue to fight to improve the lives of all Americans. And so we'll maybe cover that here in a little bit. There is a lot of news going on. We did have some great economic news, which we'll cover here later on in the hour. But I do want to play some of this Hunter Biden audio. It was during a 5.5-hour conversation here in Nashville, Tennessee, in Williamson County. And Hunter Biden sat down with a guy named Sean Ryan. Sean Ryan, by the way, an incredible podcaster. If you haven't listened to him, you should. But he had Hunter Biden on, again, 5.5-hour conversation. A lot of people are paying attention to this because it seems like Hunter is trying to restore his reputation. And the other thing that I thought is interesting is what he's trying to do is he's throwing his dad right under the bus. Now, I do find it very convenient. I'm just going to tell you. I find it convenient that Hunter goes on this podcast and is criticizing parts of his dad's administration in the 4 years. Clearly, mistakes were made. This is what Hunter Biden said about Joe Biden's open border and illegal immigration.
A vibrant immigration, but we don't want immigrants that are coming here illegally, draining us of resources, and also and being prioritized above people that are actual literal heroes that are coming home, that are still recovering from 20 years of endless war, or anybody else in our society. Right? But nobody's...
Yeah, all right, so that is Hunter throwing his dad under the bus regarding illegal immigration. And, you know, here's what I as I play this audio, here's where I'm going with this. Hunter Biden had 4 years to have some influence on his father. So where was this enlightened opinion when Alejandro Mayorkas and Kamala Harris and others within the Biden administration were telling us that the border was secure? Where was Hunter Biden? Where was this enlightened opinion on illegal immigration and how we don't want rampant, mass, open border illegal immigration? Some people are saying this is a stunning indictment of his father's 4 years in office. I say that Hunter Biden is trying to somehow try to improve his reputation. I mean, it is really easy to come back now and say these things after the damage has been done, and you can come back and sound like the hero, but I'm not buying it. By the way, this is what Sean Ryan says, and Sean Ryan is a veteran. He is somebody that I deeply respect. He says, my interview with Hunter Biden is out now. Before casting judgment, I encourage everyone to watch the full episode. He says, I've said it before. I'm open to hearing from all sides. I don't agree with everything Hunter says. He doesn't agree with everything that I say either, but that's not the point. These conversations matter. Now, I'm going to tell you that I have not watched the entire 5.5 hour discussion or interview with Hunter Biden. I would be interested to know, and maybe I'll watch it over the weekend, and I'm filling in for the guys next week. Maybe I'll come back with maybe some more cuts and some more perspective on this. But I would be curious to know, did Sean Ryan, did he ask him, well, did you ever tell your dad that? Because you were in the White House all the time. You were in the Oval Office all the time. I believe at one point he was living in the White House, staying there often. I think it was probably Hunter's cocaine that was left in the White House. Can't say that for certain, but that's my opinion. But he is coming in and he is trying to sound like the hero in some sort of a reputation reclamation project, I suppose. He's trying to rehab his image, but I'm not entirely certain why. But the other thing that I would say is that I do find it awfully convenient now that he can no longer utilize his father's influence. Now he's going to throw him under the bus, right? Because let's be honest, Hunter Biden, if he's known for anything, he is known for peddling his father's influence. But now that his father has no influence, and I would say that Joe Biden is no longer in office, and he dropped out of the race, the presidential race, as he was running for re-election. He dropped out in disgrace, absolute disgrace. And so now it's awfully convenient for his own son to throw him under the bus. Now, he's right in what he says. Hunter Biden is right in what he says about illegal immigration, but I do find it very convenient. By the way, let's not also forget about all the really reprehensible, nasty things that Hunter Biden said about folks on the right, about Republicans, about conservatives, and about Donald Trump. He said a lot of nasty things. But I'm trying to figure out what Hunter Biden's end game is. Some people are saying that he's going to run for president. But if he's talking about what he is saying about, for example, we can't have rampant illegal immigration, I don't know if that's where the progressives are right now. I certainly don't think that it is. But I don't see him finding a lot of sympathetic ears on the right. There's going to be some people that are going to cheer him on, of course, because he is talking negatively about Joe Biden and, you know, what happened during Joe Biden's horrific 4 years. But we all know that. We don't need a drug-addled, prostitute-addicted Hunter Biden to tell us that Joe Biden's 4 years were disastrous for the American people. We don't need that. We already know. We lived through it. There's also another moment where he's talking about today's society. I don't really know the context of the conversation, but he's talking about how there is a certain segment of the population where what's the best way to put this? They don't suffer any consequences for their bad behavior. Now, realize this is a guy, Hunter Biden, who has been charged with multiple crimes regarding guns and taxes, but his father pardoned him. Yet he says this.
Who ultimately seems to be benefiting?
Well, I can tell you who's not benefiting.
Not normal people.
Yeah.
Not regular guys, not the guys you served with, not the guys that I went to high school with, not nobody that I know. The people that are benefiting are the people that seem to always some way avoid the consequences and win. Mm-hmm. And that's, the 0.1%. Mm-hmm. And it's not even the 1% anymore. I mean, it's like literally and I'm not saying,
So that is Hunter Biden talking about. And again, I don't know if Sean Ryan said, well, what about the fact that your dad pardoned you walking out the door? And by the way, it is worth noting that was the one pardon that Joe Biden actually signed by hand. He didn't use the auto pen. And so it's one thing, to get a pardon. I mean, I do understand. I'll be critical, but I do understand Joe Biden pardoning his own son. But then for Hunter to run around and talk about how people these days in the upper 0.1% are not facing consequences for whatever they do. Again, don't know the context of the statement, but his statement does stand on its own as incredibly hypocritical. And I said this on my morning show this morning. Here's a senator's son, a vice president's son, then a president's son who clearly peddled influence, among many other things, in my opinion, complaining about how some in our society don't have to face consequences for their actions. When I would say that Hunter Biden is the poster boy for that. Oh, and there was more. Hunter Biden was asked if it was a mistake to join the board of Burisma.
Was it a mistake to go on the board? Yeah. Yeah, it was absolutely a mistake, not because of anything that I did that I am embarrassed about or in any way whatsoever feel conflicted about as it relates to what I did for Burisma, but because of the political position that put us all in. They used that as the toe in the door to be able to call my family the Biden crime family without any evidence.
Wow, without any evidence. Actually, I would say to Hunter Biden, your family is called the Biden crime family because you committed a bunch of crimes, and then you were pardoned for it. Also, let's not forget about the allegations of corruption, of bribery, of influence peddling. That's not from me. That's from the FBI. I mean, I don't want to sit here and relitigate the whole thing because we've been here, done that. But the lack of self-awareness, I think, to me, this whole thing just reeks of revisionist history. The other thing that they're talking about, that Sean Ryan and Hunter Biden were talking about, was the failures of the Afghanistan pullout. I mean, I know that you folks know, Gary and Eric talk about it all the time. One of the biggest failures of the Biden administration was the failed pullout of Afghanistan. And here is what Hunter said.
And he had mistakes like every other president has had. Some that I may disagree with, but absolutely 100% had some real failures also.
What do you think some of those failures were?
I think one of the failures was the way in which they executed the withdrawal from Afghanistan. I think 13 Marines are dead. I think that there was a better way to do it. And I think that, I can blame it on his generals. I can blame it on the people, the way in which we did it. But my dad always knew this also, is that the buck stops with him. I think that was a failure. I don't think.
Yeah, it was a failure, clearly. And it was a failure of President Biden. But again, people are making hay of this and say, oh, my gosh, Hunter Biden is throwing his dad under the bus. He's going after his dad. It's like, you know what? I don't know if better late than never applies to this one. But again, Hunter Biden had plenty of influence and sway over his father when his father was in the Oval Office. He chose not to speak up then. He's speaking up now, which means that, to me, there is not only a lack of self-awareness, but it is also disingenuous. And Hunter Biden is a drug addict. He was addicted to, clearly, prostitutes and bad behavior. The things that he did, horrifying. So now, I, as a conservative, am supposed to give two craps about what Hunter Biden has to say about his own father's administration, when we, as conservatives, not only lived through it, but we were calling it out in real time. So am I excited or impressed that Hunter Biden has now come out and stated the absolute obvious, that his dad's 4 years of reign here in America was an absolute train wreck? No, I'm not impressed. I knew this already. Hunter Biden, welcome to the club. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. If you can, call in, text in, 615-737-9986. Got a lot more straight ahead. This is Red Eye Radio.
This morning's USDA Farm Report is brought to you by Howes Products. Tested, trusted, guaranteed since 1920.
Are you one of those real Christmas tree owners who are taking down the tree the day after Christmas? Regardless if your end of display date is then or well into January, South Dakota State University Extension expert Robin Butterbaugh says there are many ways to reuse and recycle the tree instead of just taking it to the landfill. One idea is
have a Christmas tree pickup after Christmas. So you can put your Christmas tree on the side of the road and it gets picked up by the waste management company and then composted.
She recognizes that it is not an option in some communities. So if that's the case,
you could still chip the tree and use it for mulch if you have a chipper.
Mulch that can be spread on your flower beds and around trees and shrubs, or shared with gardening and landscaping neighbors. Another option, using the Christmas tree as outdoor habitat for wildlife, such as winter shelter for birds or a reef for fish in a pond. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
This report brought to you by Cenex Fuels and Lubes.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio. 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Yeah, just thinking about it's, and I'm going to give you a little behind that. Got more Hunter Biden audio, by the way, coming up. But just a little peek behind the curtain of talk radio, right? I've been doing talk radio for, I think, 35 years. Like spoken word, I've been producing and hosting and news, all that stuff. And there's always this debate over the appropriate content around the holidays. And so I'm just going to tell you, where I stand on that, because there's some people in talk radio that will say, well, you want to sort of, ratchet down the content and you want to be a little more Christmas spirity and all that kind of stuff. And I have a hard time with that. I'm just going to tell you, because I am such a fan of talk radio that if I'm tuning into a talk radio show, I want to hear substantive topics. I do. And so I'll throw in, maybe some little Christmassy stuff. But by and large, I assume that you're listening to a talk radio show because you want to hear talk radio topics. And so, at least for me, and other hosts may be different. I'm not, casting aspersions on anybody else. But, for me, I guess somebody sent a note on the text line at 615-737-9986, actually thanking me for bringing topics like Gary and Eric do as well, because, other hosts may just, they take it easy here as we head into Christmas on this Christmas Eve morning. My opinion is you do content. You do content that is consistent with what people are tuning in for. I'll try to soften it up a little bit maybe, But there's a lot going on, and there's a reason why you're tuning in to this content-driven radio show, usually hosted by Gary and Eric, is because you want to know what's going on. And so coming up, I've got some good news on the economy. I've got a couple more audio bites on Hunter Biden. I've got some tough-on-crime stats from the Republicans coming up as well. There is a lot going on, plus your phone calls. And the line is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. My name is Dan Mandis. You can always, please, if you would, follow me on the socials at Dan Mandis Show. That is on Facebook. That is on X. That is on Instagram. Got a lot more straight ahead on Red Eye Radio.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 869-07-3339. You know, every year we look back on that year and look at the people that we have lost in that year. And certainly 2025, tragic year for NASCAR and NASCAR fans and folks who were fans of Greg Biffle. And so there's a story that has come out here in the last couple of hours. Now, if you don't know who Greg Biffle is, and I will be honest and let you know, I know nothing about NASCAR. And the name Greg Biffle was not known to me until he tragically passed away in that airplane crash last week. So Greg Biffle, if you don't know, NASCAR legend, very popular driver, very successful driver, won a lot of races and so forth. But he was known post-career, he had retired, he was known post-career for just a massive amount of humanitarian work. I mean, this is a guy who, when Hurricane Helene happened at North Carolina, he had his own helicopter, and he flew his own helicopter to deliver essential goods to hard-to-get-to communities that were impacted by Hurricane Helene. I mean, that is amazing. And he did incredible work with animal rescues as well. He worked with the Red Cross and others. Just, he was a good human being, Greg Biffle. And he was killed last week in a horrifying plane crash along with his family, his wife and, I believe, 2 kids. Well, the Christmas cards that they sent before they tragically perished are now arriving in mailboxes. Can you imagine that? As people are mourning the loss of their good friend, Greg Biffle, they get this Christmas card in the mail. If you'd like to see it, I have posted a story from the New York Post on the Christmas card that is arriving in mailboxes. The family is pictured, this is from the Daily Mail, the family is pictured in matching white shirts and jeans, standing in front of a bunch of Christmas trees, and they're laughing. The message inside reads, "We hope that you are able to slow down and enjoy the magic and the joy that this season has to offer. We hope that you have a great new year. Sending love, Greg, Christina, Emma, and Ryder." A positive message, a great message from a great man and a great family. So I think that when you look back on 2025 and the incredible people that we sadly lost, Greg Biffle will certainly be at the top of that list. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Going way to the other end of the spectrum, talking a little bit about Hunter Biden and about this big interview that he did with a guy by the name of Sean Ryan. It's a 5.5-hour video, and it's an interview, and it's they say a wide-ranging interview. And so one of the things, and I think part of what he's doing is he's trying to get some sympathy out there from folks, because he talked about the debt that he is in, and it's he says a lot.
Litigation sucks. I've been tied up in criminal and civil and in courts, and I got I don't know, 15 million dollars in debt that I have no idea that how I'm going to be able to pay off. I have millions of dollars in debt that nobody's riding to the rescue for Hunter Biden. My dad, entered the presidency as the poorest man to ever take the office, and he left the presidency not poorest. Which he's fine, but we have no generational wealth. I don't have any, despite what these guys say, there's no billions of dollars buried underneath my dad's house in Delaware.
Right. Here's the problem, Hunter, is that when you do what you did, then you need lawyers. There's no other way to put it. Your dad was one of the most powerful politicians in America, whether we're talking about a senator or a vice president or a president. And so I just, for Hunter, I don't feel sorry for him. Remember the stories about how he was living in a fancy LA home that cost like $20,000 a month, and he's driving like a car worth a couple $100,000, if I remember right. And by the way, I don't know exactly what drugs he was on, but I happen to know the drugs are pretty expensive. And he was clearly influence peddling if you look at what he was doing, if you look what was on the laptop. Yeah, that's right, the laptop from hell. The laptop, by the way, that somehow Hunter Biden says never existed. Yeah, Hunter Biden actually says to Sean Ryan that the laptop from hell never existed. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I listened to this soundbite a number of different times as I'm trying to, figure out what exactly it is that Hunter's saying and what he's trying to sell. And he says the laptop never existed. But then he says it did exist. But it was really the hard drive, he says, that existed. And all of that stuff purported to be on the laptop or on the hard drive. It was just cobbled together by a whole bunch of, bad actors who were trying to take him out. I'm going to play this for you. And I don't know, maybe you can make sense of this. By the way, I've posted this on my Twitter feed at Dan Mandis Show. Hunter Biden, everybody.
So what I can tell you about the laptop is that there is no laptop. That's bullshit. What was provided out there, there was no laptop. There is an actual physical laptop.
So that was 13 seconds. So in 13 seconds, he says there was no laptop. Then he just said there was a laptop. Now, I do realize that dude's been on a lot of drugs. So maybe that's why he's not making a whole heck of a lot of sense. It is also entirely possible that I am up way past my bedtime and I'm not getting the point he's trying to sell.
That somebody had. But the guy that said he had the laptop, the existence of the search for the laptop came before he was even a twinkle in Rudy Giuliani's eye.
All right, so remember the story. And here's the deal. I am so incredibly burnt out on, I'm going to air quote this, I am so incredibly burnt out on the laptop that I almost didn't cover this part of the story, but a lot of people are talking about it. It's just so convoluted. But remember the story. Hunter leaves the laptop at the repair shop for months. So then the laptop owner, this was in Delaware, so then the laptop, the repair guy, can't get a hold of Hunter reads the data, believes the data to be incriminating, and gives the laptop to the FBI. He also shared the data with Rudy Giuliani and his lawyers. But what he is saying is that it was actually all of these people that were in places like Ukraine, and what they did was they cobbled together all of these old emails and all of this data to create, it's seemingly, he says, out of whole cloth, to create something incriminating.
And so what they did is they cobbled together stolen, concocted, fabricated mishmash of digital information, largely which is, thousands and thousands and thousands of emails from 25 years. I mean, no laptop could have held all of that. And so what they did is they put it all together, and then they talk about it, and they made it out to be this thing. And so then the story doesn't become about the laptop at all, because there's nothing in the laptop other than a record of me being a degenerate.
So the FBI would disagree. Chuck Grassley would disagree. James Comer would disagree from the House Oversight Committee. And a lot of people who have reported on this would disagree. So I don't really understand, and I'm not, again, I got to watch the video, the entire 5.5 hours of video. I don't know if Sean Ryan pushed back on any of this, but I would like to know how he would respond, how Hunter Biden would respond to pushback on all of this. Because there was a lot of things that were on that laptop that were clear indications that he was trying to peddle the influence. I don't really understand what he's saying, except that you had all of these people cobbling together and consolidating all of this material onto a laptop or a hard drive and made it seem like he was doing all of this sketchy stuff to peddle his dad's influence. I don't really understand. You have sources from within the FBI. You have Chuck Grassley, through his role with the Senate, I think it's the Judiciary Committee, say that there's all of these records of all kinds of shady business dealings and influence peddling. So I don't know about you, friends. I am having a hard time buying what Hunter Biden is trying to sell. So he's right on some things when he talked about, Joe Biden, his father's open border. He's right on that. He was right on the failed pullout of Afghanistan. And as far as all of this other stuff goes about the laptop from hell, I mean, heck, even the New York Times and the Washington Post, long after talk radio, people like Gary and Eric and yours truly and all of the people in talk radio and conservative media were saying, there is something to the laptop. Look at the laptop. Report on the laptop. And finally, the mainstream media, it was like years later, the mainstream media finally caught up with talk radio. Finally caught up with conservatives who were talking about the clear signs of influence peddling that Hunter Biden was trying to do as his father was vice president. And as he was getting ready to run for the presidency. So I don't know if Hunter Biden, I don't know if anybody believes that he has any credibility. I would be curious to know why do you think Hunter Biden is now coming out now? I do find it interesting that he chose Sean Ryan, who I think Sean Ryan is great. Again, please don't get me wrong. I'm a huge admirer of his. But I do wonder how Hunter Biden would stand up to an interview with someone like, Miranda Devine, who literally wrote the book on the laptop from hell. How would he react? How would his statement stand up to follow-up questions from someone like Miranda Devine, who writes a lot for the New York Post, who Remember, if I remember correctly, wasn't the New York Post one of the first ones? I think they were the first ones to report on the laptop from hell. But I don't think that he wants to go too deep. Although they did talk for like 5.5 hours, man. So I don't know if I really want to spend, my Christmas holiday watching 5.5 hours of BS from Hunter Biden. But here's the deal. He has no credibility. I believe even the hardcore Democrats would say that Hunter Biden has no real credibility. But he is hawking a book. Big shock. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Got a lot more straight ahead. This is Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye Radio, the phone number, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Folks who listen to my morning show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 99.7 WTN know that I absolutely love Senator John Kennedy out of Louisiana. He's always got great things to say, and I just discovered another one, so I'm going to be playing that coming up next, because he's talking about a subject that is near and dear to my heart, which is Democrats and their lack of ability to solve crime and their hatred of police officers. So that part of the story coming up for you next. If you can't call in, text in. Tonight only, 615-737-9986. Got a lot more straight ahead on Red Eye Radio.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One.